There are moments in life that don't make sense until it's far too late. Mine started with a name I hadn't thought about in almost 16 years. I was driving home from work on a Thursday evening. Traffic was light, and I remember turning off the radio because I wanted a little quiet after a long day. As I passed my old high school, something caught my eye: the baseball field. They'd replaced the old chain-link fence with a new one, but everything else looked almost the same. For some reason, it made me think of my childhood best friend Ryan. Ryan and I were inseparable growing up. We rode our bikes everywhere, built tree houses we were too scared to climb, skipped class once, just to spend the afternoon fishing in a creek behind the school. We were convinced we'd still be best friends when we were old men. Life had other plans. When we were 17, we got into one stupid argument. I honestly can't even remember what started it anymore. Something about a borrowed truck, or maybe money, whatever it was. Neither of us apologized. Graduation came. We went our separate ways. Every few years I'd think about calling him, but enough time had passed that it always felt awkward. Eventually I stopped thinking about it altogether, until that evening. I actually laughed to myself. I wonder what Ryan's doing these days. That was the exact thought. I remember it because about 15 minutes later, I saw him standing beside the road. At first, I didn't recognize him. He was wearing a faded brown jacket and jeans, standing beneath an old streetlight with one hand raised, asking for a ride. People don't usually hitchhike around here anymore. I almost drove past. Then he smiled. It was the same crooked smile he'd had since we were kids, the kind that always made it look like he knew something funny that nobody else did. I hit the brakes. He climbed into the passenger seat. For a second we just stared at each other. Then he laughed. I didn't think you'd stop. I laughed too. I almost didn't. He shook his head, still overthinking everything. Hearing him say that was strange. That was something he'd teased me about constantly growing up. You really are, Ryan. I told you. I pulled back onto the road. I can't believe this. Neither can I. For the next 20 minutes, it felt like we'd picked up exactly where we'd left off. We talked about school, old teachers, friends we'd lost touch with, the baseball field, even the creek where we'd spent entire summers pretending to catch fish. Ryan remembered everything, even things I'd completely forgotten. He reminded me about the time I'd fallen out of a tree trying to impress a girl. I laughed so hard I almost missed my turn. For the first time in years, I felt like I was 17 again. Eventually I asked the question that had been bothering me. So where have you been all this time? Ryan looked out the passenger window. Oh, here and there. That answer caught me off guard. You married? He smiled faintly. No. What about kids? He shook his head. What about your parents? They still in town? No. Something about his voice had changed. Not much, just quieter. I figured maybe I was asking about things he didn't want to talk about, so I changed the subject. You still remember old Miller's gas station? A small smile returned. Mm-hmm. You remember how we stole candy from there? Mm-hmm. I still feel bad about that. Mm-hmm. I laughed. You really don't talk much anymore. Ryan didn't answer. I glanced over. He was still looking out the window, perfectly still. I shrugged it off and kept driving. People change. 16 years is a long time. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was different. Not his face. Not his voice. Just something I couldn't quite explain. About 10 minutes later, I noticed something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We had driven under at least a dozen streetlights. Every time one passed over my car, the inside of the cabin lit up. The dashboard, the steering wheel, my hands, everything. Everything except Ryan's face. No matter how bright the light outside became, his face never seemed to come into view. It stayed hidden in shadow, as if the darkness beside me was refusing to let him go. I told myself I was imagining it. It had been a long day. The lighting inside my car wasn't exactly great, and maybe the angle of the streetlights just made it look strange. There had to be an explanation. There always was. So I kept talking. You remember Coach Harris? Mm-hmm. I still can't believe he made us run laps because you skipped practice. A faint smile crossed Ryan's face. Mm-hmm. I chuckled. You let me take the blame for that. For a second, I thought he was about to laugh. Instead, he simply looked out the window again. Sorry. It was the first complete word he'd spoken in several minutes. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not because it sounded strange, because it sounded final. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I reached over and turned the radio on. Nothing, just static. I switched stations. Every single one hissed with the same empty noise. Ryan never looked away from the window. Finally, he spoke. "Take the next left." I frowned. "There isn't anything down there." "There is." I followed the road anyway. It narrowed quickly. Street lights disappeared behind us, replaced by old trees that leaned over the pavement like they were trying to block out the sky. I couldn't remember the last time I'd driven there. The road ended at a rusted bridge crossing a narrow river. The county had closed it years ago. Concrete barriers blocked both lanes. I stopped the car. Ryan finally turned toward me. For the first time since he'd gotten in, I could see his face clearly. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Maybe a little older, maybe a little more tired. But it was Ryan. "Thanks for the ride," he said quietly. I laughed nervously. "You're really getting out here?" He nodded. "I've been trying to get home." He reached for the door handle. Something made me ask the question. "Ryan." He paused. "Why did we stop talking?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he smiled. "The funny thing is, I don't remember anymore. Neither did I. Not really. Whatever had ended our friendship had been so small, neither of us could even remember it. 16 years, gone because two stubborn teenagers refused to apologize." Ryan looked at me one last time. "I'm glad you stopped." Then he stepped out of the car. I watched him walk toward the bridge. Halfway across, the darkness swallowed him. He didn't keep walking. He simply wasn't there anymore. I jumped out of the car. "Ryan." No answer. I ran onto the bridge. There was nowhere he could have gone. The river was 30 feet below. Trees lined both sides. The bridge stretched straight for another 100 yards. Empty. Completely empty. I searched until my phone battery died. Eventually I drove home, convincing myself I'd somehow lost sight of him in the dark. It sounded ridiculous, but it sounded less ridiculous than what I'd actually seen. The next morning I searched his name online. Nothing. No social media. No recent photos. No phone number. Just an old alumni page with his graduation picture. I called another guy from school I still talk to every now and then. After a few minutes of catching up, I asked the question. "Do you remember Ryan Collins?" There was a long silence. Finally he said, "You really don't know?" My grip tightened around the phone. "Know what?" "Ryan died." I felt my heart sink. "What?" "It was the summer after graduation. Car accident. He lost control on the old Mill Creek Bridge." The bridge. The exact bridge where I'd dropped him off. I couldn't speak. I thought everyone knew. After we hung up I sat there for almost an hour without moving. Part of me wanted to believe someone was playing a cruel joke, that I'd misunderstood, that there had to be another Ryan. Then I remembered something. I grabbed my car keys and walked outside. The passenger seat was empty. Exactly as I'd left it, but the floor mat was covered in dried river mud. One muddy footprint. Just one. It started beside the passenger door and ended in front of the seat. There were no footprints leading back out. I cleaned that floor mat 3 times, scrubbed it until my hands hurt. The mud came off. The footprint didn't. It's still there today. Sometimes when I'm driving home late at night, I catch myself looking at the empty passenger seat. And every now and then, I swear I hear someone quietly say, "Still overthinking everything." I don't look anymore, because if I do, I'm afraid this time, he'll be sitting there.